So, Josue, when you look at this, what do you notice, sir? What stands out to you? What's noteworthy?
The two guys with the cane.
The two guys with the canes? Okay, what do they do with those canes? Are you saying there's something wrong with having a cane? I'm well on my way,
They're using it
as an older member of society, to using a cane to get around. I'm kidding, go ahead.
They're using it like as a weapon.
They're using it as a weapon, okay. Eliam,
Yeah.
what is this cartoon trying to relay? What is the point of view of this cartoon?
I want to say that, like, I think those are northern on the left side. They're like, they're not really having anything. They're just staring at them, and they're just seeing. Whether it's just portraying, I'm assuming the northerners as like they're good, not good with no negotiations, but they're calm and collected, while the south is like barbaric.
Yeah, it's a good, not a bad word for it. Okay, this tells us everything we have to know. The symbol of the north is a pen. The symbol of the south is the bludgeon. Who knows what a bludgeon is? What does it mean to bludgeon somebody? Anybody know that's a good word? To beat them, to crush them. So the symbol of the north is a pen, and here we have a man using a pen, sitting at a desk peacefully, minding his own business, or as drunk history would have you believe, looking around like, I'm blind, I can't see, who is that? Bam! Woo! Now I'm alive, but I'm blind. Yeah, he's there writing. We can assume this is the legislative body of the Senate. He's working on some sort of legislature. He's working with his pen, which shows an advanced state of being that's more than just argument and violence and fighting. Whereas the Southerners prefer to use violence. So in a sense, like, I want you to help get this through your heads, not like a cane through your head, but like a thought through your head, about the way both sides, we've read now both perspectives and seen cartoons, how both sides like to pretend that they're the what? Yeah, in both sides we see both groups of people, the North and the South, portraying themselves as victims, right? In Calhoun's mind, as we read at length last class, it's all on the North. They're the ones who are the aggressors, they're the ones who are the oppressors, they're the ones taking away our rights. They're the ones who brought all this trouble. Northern side of things, we're here in the Senate trying to just mind our own business and pass laws and do our jobs, and we're being attacked by canes. So it really does help us understand this time period of a real lack of compromise, a lack of willingness to see the other side's point of view, a lack of middle ground, and really a lack of any real future together. So today, one of my favorite ones of the year, we'll talk about drifting, and I asked you in your chapter, drifting towards disunion. Now I asked you in your chapter if drifting was an appropriate name. Drifting. What does it mean to drift? Gradually, slowly get somewhere. So were we drifting towards disunion in the 1850s, or would there be a better word for it? Slane, what do you think?
I said that it was like an appropriate word to use, but thinking of it now, some of the things that happened made the disunion happen a lot faster.
Okay, sure. Then it gets sped up by some things. Rubes, what do you think?
Well, in the homework I had answered that I feel like during the time the country was already in disunion, like politically and socially, like they had already had so much sectionalism and so many issues, and I feel like they were just already in this union, but I also feel like it was also escalating.
Cool. So they're already kind of broken up, but it's let me ask you something, guys. And this is a dumb analogy because it's not perfectly apples to apples. But who here has ever been in a relationship before?
Kind of relationship.
Like a boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend, married, right? And or maybe you watched one on TV. I don't know. Y'all single as hell. This is cute. Is breaking up the first step of breaking up or the last step of breaking up?
That's the last step.
Yeah. So like to Ruby's argument, the country's already in disunion. They just haven't broken up yet. And you could argue that all these compromises are attempts to save what in reality was already gone. Or you could argue that 1850 was a nice point where we could have had nice balance. We could have had California come in, we could have had the fugitive slave law, we could have left those western territories open to slavery eventually, and we would have been okay with that compromise for a long time. And it was the bumbling political idiots of the 1850s that sped us up. The Stephen Douglases of the world, the Preston Brooks of the world, the James Buchanans of the world, who just do dumb things that get us there faster. So there's a couple ways you could look at this situation, but either way, by 1860, it's over. So I don't have the right answer because there is no right answer. It just depends on how you want to interpret the events that get us there. Right? I often ask kids, and maybe I'll ask you today if we have time, at what point was the Civil War inevitable? I asked you the same thing with the Revolutionary War. At what point was there no turning back? And some of you guys said, oh, it was, the Boston Massacre because people were dying. Well, that's 5 years before the Revolutionary War. Some of you said, oh, it was the Boston Tea Party. Okay, well, so my point is not that there's a right answer, but at what point, to your point, that it was already broken up, at what point does that happen? Can you put a date on it? Can you put a date on a relationship when both sides realize this is probably not working out, but they're still kind of trying? I don't know. It's a good question. So, we'll talk about the politics and economics of the late 1850s, and then we'll end today with the election of 1860, the election of Lincoln, which is a big day. So let us begin. So 1850, again, because this compromise is important, I'm going to keep harping on it. Can you see over here? Wait, you can move the middle. 1850, we have this nice compromise. Are both sides kind of happy with this compromise? Yeah, to a moderate extent. Both sides are okay with it. We're good to go. We have our free states and territories. We got our slave states. And we have popular sovereignty over here. So what happens in 11 years that gives us this? How, in just 11 years, do we go from a spirit of compromise when Henry Clay is working to get, and Calhoun, and we're trying to get this situation together? And how do we get to a place where 11 years later we have the southernmost states declaring themselves independent from the United States of America, seceding, forming their own constitution, electing their own president, cementing the institution of slavery in their body of government? How? How do we get to a place where this is where we are? And then why do we have 4.5, we'll get there, slave states, states that have slavery, choose to stay in the Union?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I know you have a full class.
I do, I'm busy.
Beatrice is leaving home. She's not feeling well.
Cool, I'm not feeling well either. Can I go home?
Yes.
You got this?
Yes, I got
Cool,
it.
thanks, Frankie.
I'll take over.
So, bye, B. So, why? How do we get to a place where in 11 years from the compromise 1850 we have a whole civil war about this institution? So, let's go back over time to make sure that we are super concrete on how we got here. Super concrete on how we got here. So you ready for this? If you get a long, for your DBQs or your LEQs, they'll often ask you to address a long period of time. So it's important that you don't just know a bunch of incidents that are isolated, but how they all connect. Which is why I often do this during classes, kind of thread the longer developments. So this issue of sectionalism and compromise going hand in hand goes all the way back to the Constitution. Why we fight over slavery in terms of representation. We fight over slavery in terms of population and taxation. We fight over slavery in terms of importation of slaves. We have those two important early compromises, the 3/5 and the slave trade compromise. This one in which slaves will count for 3/5 of population and taxation purposes. And the slave trade compromise, which basically says we'll give the federal government the right to regulate interstate commerce as long as they don't touch slavery for the next 20 years. So early on, we're figuring out our situation with slavery. And again, early on, we're hoping this problem goes away. Does the problem go away? No, never. Absolutely not. So our early republic, our early political parties are kind of founded on this states' rights versus federal authority questions. We have our first two political parties, which are what, Josue? Our first two parties.
Democratic Republicans.
And?
Federalists.
Good, and Federalists. Good. So our first two parties, right? One likes loose interpretation, federal government. One likes strict interpretation, state governments. We have our Alien and Sedition Acts, which cause a ton of crisis. We have this idea of nullification introduced by the Democratic Republicans, by Jefferson, by Madison about the Alien and Sedition Acts in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Right? This early idea of being able to nullify a federal law is going to permeate arguments about pro-slavery later. Even on the Federalist side, we have the Hartford Convention. When the Federalists are like, this Constitution sucks. We keep electing Virginian presidents. This 3/5 compromise sucks. It gives too much power to the South. We as Federalists, we need a little more authority. We want to secede a little bit. Doesn't get that far. And then slavery-wise, our first big important compromise once we become a nation is in Missouri. All right, but we talked about that. We're good to go there. That 3630 line, we're in business. Under Jackson, we have some serious compromises that need happening. We have that second huge nullification crisis. This time not dealing with the Alien and Sedition Acts, but dealing with the Tariff of Abominations. We have the threat from Jackson to hang Calhoun over his refusal to pay the tariff. We have Henry Clay stepping in here and here with compromises. In South Carolina, the compromise is gradually lowering the tariff on one side and then allowing Jackson to use the army to enforce federal law on the other side. We call that, if you guys remember, the olive branch and the sword. Important compromise there. Jackson's bank war. Jackson's vetoing of federal funding for improvements. We see a bunch of controversy that all kind of stem back to this question of state versus federal authority. Across the board. Across the board. At various times, we've had the states' rights group arguing against the federal government. At other times, we have the federal government arguing against the state rights groups, or parties, if you will. So throughout this time period, there are slavery issues, but a lot of the issues are really geared by power. Who has the power? Who exerts the power? How they exert the power? Is it a states' rights issue? Do the states have the power to do this? Or is it the federal government that has the right to do this? So over time, there's a long... What I want you to be able to thread is this long-term discussion over who has power in the early republic up to 1850, the national government or the state government. And it all goes back to that question of interpretation. Things really change about here. It really is, that's why I love this quote of the week up from the week. It really is Mexico, the conquering of Mexico, that throws everything else out of proportion. Because it's that issue that really puts slavery back to the front of American politics at a time when American politics is already really getting divided about reform movements and slavery and the rights of it. So first it's the annexation of Texas, which the Northern Whigs are against, the Southern Democrats are pro. Then it's the Mexican War, same thing. The Southern Democrats are for, the Northern Whigs are against. We see the Lincoln Spot resolution that this war is immoral unless if we force them into war on our behalf. We see, which I've already mentioned, Henry David Thoreau's civil disobedience. This war is immoral. I shouldn't pay taxes or support it. The Wilmot Proviso after the war about not expanding slavery into the territories. This Mexican War, subsequent to the annexation of Texas, really does elevate slavery to the foremost political problem in America in the 1850s. And now, of course, the Compromise of 1850 is supposed to solve that, but the Compromise introduces the idea of popular sovereignty. It's then Douglas that steals popular sovereignty as an idea and puts it in Kansas, Nebraska, which leads to Bleeding Kansas, which again reminds us how much we hate the issue of slavery, and all of our world goes to hell. So I want you to talk to your partner for a second on that first question. How did compromise help solve political crises of all types, and why does that break down? Why? So how is, up to this point, political compromise solving problems, why does that issue break down by 1840 and 1850? So take two to talk about it and write your answer down. Have a quick little chat, and then we will go from there. Go for it.
What I said was that what it solved was putting slavery to the side and focusing on other issues. And what it broke it down was gaining Mexico. Because when we get in Mexico, we were forced to look at the balance between slavery and free slaves. You know.
So the acquiring of new territory opens to the question of what Whether they put it in free
Yeah, so
or.
they bring, there's a, like, what's the word? Well, they both get a benefit out of it. Some of them.
Why? I mean, why does it break down? Why does it fall apart?
Oh, probably because like there's a new issue that comes up and then that issue overrides what they previously had.
Political choices, so I guess.
Just get to a point where both sides can't be
Wait,
happy.
what did you say yourself?
That's reasonable.
How?
It was able to put slavery to the side and focus on other issues.
Read. So what? What do you think? How come we can't compromise anymore? Maybe it's an issue that like once we get to a point like we can't compromise over slavery anymore. One side is so entrenched against slavery, and one side is so entrenched against expansion of slavery that you like think about your own life. Like, there's some things I'm sure you can compromise on. Agreed? But I'm sure there's parts of your life that I'm not going to compromise on. I really believe in that, and I'll compromise on it. Agreed? And and think about that for the whole nation. Right? There's some things that you're going to negotiate, and other things that are non-negotiable. Yeah. I like that.
That's good.
All right. So I know we give him a really hard time in this class, but I think we need to give a little bit of credit to Henry Clay. We do. Not of course, as a presidential candidate. He's not the finest. But in terms of his willingness to do whatever it took to keep the country together, it plays a really big role. In times when we could have come to a place of compromise being impossible, he finds a way to bring the two sides together. And I think part of that is from his nature, but part of that is also where he's from. Where's he from? What region? Great. What region, though? You're right. He's not Kentucky, but yeah. Kentucky. He's from the West. He's from kind of the frontier, which is no longer the frontier by 1850. Now the frontier is further past him. But he's not from the North or the South. He's from a slave state, but not a deep South state. So I think it's important that, I think Clay's perspective as the Western opinion is kind of like that third sibling, right? The middle kid, all right? Where the youngest and the oldest are always fighting against the middle kid who's like, what if we just did this instead? Because he's not the youngest or the oldest, he's not the South or the North. He's able to kind of see things from both perspectives, and I think that makes a big difference in figuring out how to keep things together. First of all, he's old. I told you he's never going to die. He died. I apologize. But he didn't die for a long time. We spent most of our first semester with Henry Clay. Front and center. Compromise 1820, South Carolina nullification crisis, Compromise 1850. He's responsible for all three of them. All three of them are times when we could have ended in civil war. This would have been a funny civil war, because it would have been like Andrew Jackson and the United States against all of South Carolina by themselves. Would have been interesting. But all three, we could have had disunion at the very least, of the union breaking up. And in all three times, we find a way to keep it together. He's dead by the mid-1850s. And, of course, the rest of the 1850s are a time of Kansas-Nebraska Act, Bleed in Kansas, Dred Scott case, John Brown, lighting things on fire, getting wild, and then Civil War. So as soon as, I'm sure he'd like that we're saying this about him, but as soon as he dies, part of it's coincidence, part of it's the fact that everything falls apart when he dies. So I argue that, to your point, and to the point I heard some of you guys talking about, the reason we can't compromise anymore is political developments have made compromise impossible. What if we had all this time, every time there was a compromise, what did we have? A war. We had a war over the Missouri Compromise?
Oh, not really.
What did the country have that helped?
Pride.
Sure, pride. Two strong parties. 1820, well actually in 1820 it's more about the end, so one strong party. But in each of the crisis situations we have strong political identity as a country. All right, 1820, it's kind of the end of the good feelings. We're all Democratic Republicans. We all feel pretty good of ourselves. 1833, nullification. We see Democrats and the National Republicans. 1848, Democrats and Whigs. Through the 1850s, the political parties kind of fall apart. And people don't have a strong political identity. then they're less likely to be willing to have a discussion and compromise to feel like their side can be represented. So like I told you guys a couple weeks ago, first the parties fall apart. Who falls apart next? The churches, right? Then the denominations fall apart, and then the country falls apart. So I think that part of your first question is this idea that the parties kind of fall apart, and that leaves us to a place where, as new parties rise up in their place, there are parties that are less likely to compromise. The Republicans, for example, are not going to compromise on the expansion of slavery. They're just not. Why? Because the only thing that holds them together is their all belief in no expansion of slavery. So these new parties are much more ideologically strong on one side or the other on the issue of slavery, whereas the old party systems, Democrats and Whigs, for example, they like to ignore slavery. They're like, yeah, Democrats are like, yeah, states' rights. Whigs are like, yeah, pro-federal government. Slavery, yeah, we don't want to talk about that. And our new parties are much more willing to actually take a stance on slavery. And when you take a stand on something, you're much less likely to be willing to compromise. So that's kind of how it happens. The first one you guys should know is this Free Soil Party, which we talked about the last couple classes. And again, Liam, are they anti-slavery? What are they? Yeah, right. They're just more about these homesteaders that want to go out and put a little farm together on the frontier in the West without having to compete with slaveholders. Because if you have to compete with slaveholders, who's going to win that economic competition? Yeah, because they don't have to pay their labor. They can afford more land. Right? You can't compete with them. So they want land. I'll circle it for you guys. The Free Soil Party is really focused on like this chunk of society. And they want it to be free soil here in this right middle of the country because they realize that's the next frontier. If they want to spread out, if they want to have opportunities, they need to make sure they're not competing with slavery. Also that pops up in the 1840s, very important, the Know Nothing Party. The Know Nothing Party. They're also called the American Party. What's the one thing they stand for? Yeah, they're just very nativist. They're very anti-immigration. Who's coming to the country this time? Germans and Irish, yeah. Good job, guys. I like small classes. That's kind of fun. I can look at all you guys in the eyes as we talk. That's right.
What color are my eyes?
Ugly. Brown. They're beautiful, though. Should be very proud of your eyes.
Thank you.
No problem. The Know Nothing Party, they're mostly in northern cities. Why northern cities? Where do most of the immigrants go?
To the factories.
Northern cities. That's where factory jobs are. And these people are very anti-immigrants because they're worried about competition for jobs. They're kind of like, they're mostly northern party. The Whig Party kind of dies out after the election of 1852. They lose in the election. They're kind of split on sectional lines, south and north as well, so they kind of fracture. Once Buchanan, as the Democrat, wins the election in 1852 and 1854, after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, he proposes the Ostend Manifesto, which should be in your notes as well, the Ostend Manifesto, which he proposes that we just add Cuba real quick. Hey, Cuba! Come on in. We want you as a slave state. Did anybody ask Cuba? There's this whole elaborate scheme that really starts with Polk. Polk, the expansionist president. And he's trying to look southward to see where we can add some more territory. Polk, of course, is the one whose election is responsible for annexing Texas. And his presidency is responsible for the Mexican-American War. So Polk being very pro-expansion. He starts this conversation about spreading slavery into the Caribbean islands as well. So even this Ostend Manifesto is going to split the two parties, because this looks a little wild. And really, it's the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which throws it all. Stephen Douglas is just a brilliant man, a brilliant politician. It's this Kansas-Nebraska Act, which we've already split our Whigs. The Kansas-Nebraska Act splits the Democrats as well. And you Southern Democrats who were like, yeah, Stephen Douglas, you did it, just what we wanted, more space for slavery. And Northern Democrats who were like, what the hell are you doing? That was really dumb, bro. That was really dumb. It's the Kansas-Nebraska Act as the perpetuating event that creates all these little coalition groups, these know-nothings, and these northern Whigs that we call conscience Whigs, and these northern Democrats who are anti-expansion slavery, and the Free Soil Party. All these little groups come together into the Republican Party because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So that should be something that is in the forefront of your mind in this time period, is the Kansas-Nebraska Act causes the Republican Party to form. Who beat Stephen Douglas for the presidency in 1860? The Republican Party. So Stephen Douglas caused his own demise in the election of 1860 by having the event that started the party that beat him. Pretty awesome. I like to clown on Stephen Douglas whenever possible. Mostly because he's short. Even then, sectionally, there's also economic factors that play a role in our unwillingness to compromise. I think it's easy to have a nice compromising discussion when the economy's doing well, because everybody's being profitable, and you're like, yeah, you know, we can meet in the middle because we're all making money. You guys agree with that statement? What do you guys think? Is it easier to compromise as a nation, as groups, when the economy's good or bad? I think good. I think good, because when the economy's bad, everyone's blaming each other. When the economy's good, everyone's kind of happy, everyone has jobs, everyone's good. 1857, we have our next huge panic. So right as all this sectional political tensions happening, we have an economic disaster as well. The Panic of 1857, we drop tariffs a ton, which makes the South happy, but Northern industrialists very unhappy. And the president at the time, James Buchanan, he's a very, very weak president who is perceived as not having a stance on anything, really weakens the Democrats' reputation. Who do you blame when there's a financial panic?
The Democrats.
Yeah, the party in charge and the president. So, like, all of this, our last, like, kind of strong national party is the Democrats, and the Panic of 1857 really tarnishes them as well. So here we are at the end of the 1850s, and the Whigs are gone. The Republicans are what?
The new Whigs.
They're brand new. Right? They're a brand new party. That's always a struggle. So Democrats are kind of split. The Whigs are gone. Republicans are brand new. Democrats are national party still, but they're split up over slavery, and they're unpopular because of the Panic of 1857. So all of these factors are going to play a role in the disaster that is the late 1850s. So that's really what gives us the Republican Party. What gives us the Republican Party. So the Whigs are weak, like I told you. They've been losing members over slavery. 1852 is really their last national election. That Know-Nothing Party, pro-Native Born American, anti-immigration. The Free Soil Party, and that's what gives us this Republican Party, which is a combination, like I told you, ex-Whigs, anti-slavery Democrats, Free Soilers, Nativists, etc. So let's talk about this for a second. The Republicans are pro-tariffs and pro-industry. What are our other parties in the past that have been pro-tariffs and pro-industry, pro-business, therefore pro-banking? Federalists and the National Republicans, who became the Whigs. Whigs. So really, every time this party dies, they kind of make a little bit of adjustment there in the grave, and they come back as something new. So Federalists, they died. They came back as the National Republicans under Clay and Quincy Adams. Remember this in the 1820s? That wasn't a good enough name, so they became the Whigs. They died, and they became the Republicans. Go figure. And really all they care about is big business, tariffs, industry, and they're not anti-slavery either. They're not, I promise. They're anti-expansion of slavery. They want to get rid of the Kansas-Nebraska Act because that allowed for more slavery. They just want the Missouri. They don't want to get rid of slavery where it is. They want the Missouri Compromise back. We had this whole thing figured out. It was all good. Everybody was happy. How come we had to go and change that? Stephen Douglas, you angry little midget. So that gives us our political situation in the 1850s, which is, of course, very tense. Now, in 1856, we have an election for president. Why?
Because every 4 years.
Because we have one every 4 years. Exactly. Good. You guys are catching on. So Franklin Pierce, who was the president under the Kansas-Nebraska Act, is very unpopular. Why? Because bleeding Kansas is a disaster. Every day people read in the newspaper about people dying in Kansas. Everyone's like, well, first of all, where the hell's Kansas? Oh, Kansas. That's in America. Why are people dying? Being killed by other Americans over this question of the expansion of slavery or non-expansion of slavery. So what does Pierce do about bleeding Kansas? What do you think Pierce does about bleeding Kansas? Nothing. Nothing. He's like, oh yeah, ooh, that's not good. People did what? John Brown did what with a giant sword? That's not good. But Pierce doesn't want to get in the way because Pierce wants Kansas to be pro-slavery. Of course, this makes Pierce look very weak and unpopular. So he gets the lovely distinction of not even being nominated for a second term. He's like, yes, here I am, Democratic president. Like, yeah, one round with you was enough. You can go home now. Thank you for your contribution. Democrats nominate James Buchanan. The brand new party, the Republicans, nominate their first presidential candidate.
Is that where they, that's where Fremont gets the name? Like the school?
Yeah, John C. Fremont. Because Fremont, for about 6 days, was the president of the Republic of California, which didn't really exist.
Is every school named like that?
Hmm?
After an important person in history?
So, the Republicans, how long have they been a party? Oh yeah, yesterday I told you?
Yeah.
We're down the bus yesterday, you go into USC, you go right here,
Adams, and
you go Jefferson, Adams, Washington. And then one down from Jefferson, the big signal, MLK, or Madison. So, Republicans, when did they become a party?
After the death of the Whigs.
No.
Free
What? What event created them as a party?
Oh,
Nebraska, Kansas.
Yeah, 1854. In 2 years, that's a big deal. In 2 years, they've gone from not being a party to actually running a presidential candidate. It's a lot of growth quickly. So they nominate John C. Fremont. He's from California. He's one of the explorers during the Mexican War who helped get California into the Union. It's a long, complicated story. If I taught a California history class, I'd spend a lot of time with him, but I don't. And the Whigs and Know Nothings both make a little coalition, a little tandem alliance. And they nominate our boy Millard Fillmore. He's back. What? They don't, I mean, again, like the Federalists died, but they're still around. You see what I'm saying? So there's still enough of them. They just die as a national power party. Keep in mind, like the Federalists don't ever run a president, don't ever get a president elected after Adams, but they're still running candidates up until the Hartford Convention. So, sometimes you're a dead party, but you don't know you're dead yet. Right? Sometimes your presidential hopes are dead, you don't know they're dead yet, like Henry Clay. So, they come together to nominate Millard Fillmore, and I'll show you on the map why they're dead. Fair? So Buchanan wins as a Democrat, but he only gets 45% of the popular vote. Only gets 45% because it's a third-party election. It's an election where there's 3 main groups, which means no one candidate can get a good, strong majority. It'd be like a 45, 35, 20. Because there's 3 main groups. So we elect Buchanan, and I'll show you on the map why this matters in a second. We elect Buchanan, only has 45%. Does that mean he's really popular? No, he's not very popular at all. And he's a really good president because he's timid, he's scared, he's indecisive, and in my opinion is one of the absolute weakest presidents in American history. It's always good to have a president who's timid, scared, can't make a decision, doesn't know what he's doing. In a time of national crisis, what do you want in your president? Yeah, decisiveness, strength, authority. So in the next 4 years, the country's going to fall apart, and he's going to be in the White House Oval Office like, I don't know what to do. This is scary. What do you think I should do? No, I can't do that. No. I'll just do nothing. That'll solve the problem. The Know Nothing Party kind of declines. The Republicans are going to stick around. The Whigs are going to kind of jump into the Republicans at this point. And that's what gives us our 2 main parties. So let's look at the map, though. First of all, a really strong showing here by our friend Millard Fillmore. He wins Maryland. Well done. Well done. So what do you guys see up here, though?
Not many people go for Republicans.
Take a look at the map. Take a minute, talk about it. What does this map mean? Who wins this election? It's pretty obvious. But then, who wins from this election? 1 minute. Chat it out. Go. Chat. Take a look at the map.
Basically the Democrats. Because the Republicans are a new party.
None people know about the nothing.
They knew nothing about the Nothing Party? What's up?
You said the Know Nothing Party, they were only voted in Ireland?
Yeah, they just got one state. It's the Nothing Whig collection. I don't know nothing about Whigs. Because they were very like secretive. They started as like a very anti-immigrant. So like would ask, oh, I know nothing. But they started as a very kind of like a clique. All right. Slay. What does this map tell you? Again, teach it every class. Just based on the election map. Just go what I could happen. Talk to me.
Well, you can definitely see based on like the key right there that Buchanan was a lot more popular than Fremont.
Okay, at least sectionally. Okay. Shaylee, what do you think? What can you tell from up here? What's going on?
Well, I think the Democratic are winning the states.
Okay, the Democrat. Where do they win all the states though? Where is their power? Yeah, in the South. Where are all the Republican votes coming from? Have we seen an election like this ever before? When? If you can answer yes, I'm going to ask you when. We saw this in like 1796 when we have only these states, and it's like Federalist, Democratic, Republican. Adams, Jefferson. 1800, Adams, Jefferson. But since then, we've never seen an election that's so clearly one color on the bottom and one color on the top. We haven't seen that. Because it's been like, oh yeah, this party wins a couple down here and some in the west. This is the first time we've really seen an election map that is very clearly north versus south. Agreed?
Yep.
That's important. Now, what's more worrisome if you're the South is this realization. Is this the first anti-expansion slavery in American politics? No. Give me the other two examples. The Whigs weren't anti-expansion slavery. Who was anti-expansion slavery that ran presidential candidates? We talked about him and how he started two political parties, and the Free Soil Party.
Oh yeah, Van Buren.
Yeah, with Van Buren. So like the Free Soil Party, they ran a presidential candidate. They didn't do very well. And the other party that never really ran a candidate was remember the Liberty Party?
Oh yeah.
From 1840. So we have these two like mini pretend parties that both are anti-expansion of slavery. Did they ever do this? Win this many states? Absolutely not. So what we see is this is the first time a party has existed that is anti-expansion of slavery that is actually getting electoral college votes on a large basis. That's scary for the South. Because let's do some math. So we have 114 to 174, yes? You want to do some election math with me? Let's, just for fun, figure out what the math would look like if Republicans won every state where there was no slavery. You with me so far?
Yeah.
So what are some states we should take away from the Democrats and add to the Republicans? California. Okay, cool. That's 4. Okay. Who else? Who else up here should we take away? The one next to Ohio. Illinois and Indiana. How many of those together? 11 and 13. How many is that? 24.
Pennsylvania.
Ooh, Pennsylvania's a big one. That's 27. They don't have slaves in Pennsylvania.
South Carolina.
What else?
Delaware.
Delaware has a couple slaves, but they're not really a pro-slavery state, so sure.
New
Jersey, okay, they have some slaves too in New Jersey, but it's a very minimal number.
Maryland.
Oh no, Maryland is a southern state.
Connecticut.
Ooh, Connecticut, but they already voted red. How about Missouri? Do they have slaves? Yeah, okay, cool. So what we just did right now is we took all these other states that are considered either northern states or middle states that are not pro-slavery. Let's do some math. All right, 174, yes? Let me just add up all these numbers of what we're going to take away from them, and we're going to add them over here. Okay? Tell me my numbers I'm adding up.
4
plus
plus 24
Okay?
Plus 27.
Uh-huh.
3.
7? Cool. That's 65 votes. We're going to add 65 over here. And we're going to take away 65 over here. Oh, crap. From an election math standpoint, what do we now have a possibility of? What? The Republicans winning if what?
If these states voted for them.
Yeah, if we count up all the states that are either minimally or anti-slave, they don't have slaves, we're looking at 179 to 109 for the Republicans. That's insane. Because guess what that means?
More.
You could win the presidency pretty easily getting how many votes in the South? How many votes in the South would you need to win the presidency? How do you figure? I just gave you the answer. Look at the map again. How many votes would you need in the South to win the presidency? No, that's total. How many southern states would you need? Take a minute, talk about it, do some English math. How many southern states would you need to win the presidency? Chat it out. Talk about it, figure it out. Because the answer is way simpler than you think.
Barely reached 9.
109 states?
This is electoral college math. I just gave you the answer. Talk about it. How can you get to the presidency getting X amount of states in the South?
Oh, it's all the states of the world.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
13 states.
No.
14. 14 states?
Use some critical thinking here for me.
14 states?
No. You're making this way too hard on yourself.
Repeat the question.
How many southern states, if you're running for president, how many southern states would you need to support you to become the president?
All of them.
What? 0.
What?
We just did the math.
Oh.
I just showed you exactly. You got it. You got it.
I don't
Yes,
know.
I get it.
It's not a value thing.
This is my point. I just showed you how many votes the Republicans already had. They were already at 114 with these states. Yes? That part happened. They had 114 electoral college votes for the presidency. I got you. Chavez, you confused still?
No, I got it.
Yeah. So they were already at 114. And then I added up all the non-slaveholding states that could have voted Republican, and then we just changed the numbers, and all of a sudden with zero votes in the South, you can become president. Because the North has so many more people. And with more people, you have more House of Representatives. And with more House members, you have more electoral college votes. So the South looks at this map and says, cool, we won the presidency. Oh, shit. We could lose the presidency even if we all voted for the exact same candidate. It was hilarious to me how long that took you guys.
It's because you worded it really
I worded it right. You understood it wrong.
No, you
Yeah.
said
Yeah,
how many votes
they
they
did
did.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is 0. You need 0 Southern votes to become president.
No, you said how many states does it need for
Yeah?
us?
How many Southern states you need to become president? The answer is still 0.
a single one.
It's my fault you were confused?
That's your job.
Did I fix the confusion?
Yes.
That's my job. Look at our electoral college math. So Southerners are happy with the victory, but they're worried that there is now a party that's not just a little fringe party. It's not a mini party, like the Free Soil Party, the Liberty Party. It's not a pretend little party. There is a full national party that is devoted to ending the expansion of slavery. The North realizes that, wait a second, why didn't we think about this sooner? We have way more people than they do. We have way more electoral college votes than they do. You could fully become president as a Republican by only campaigning to northern states. How could the South have fixed this? I don't know. Maybe attract some immigrants. How would you attract immigrants? Industrialize, get rid of slavery, create some jobs, have some infrastructure. But God forbid that would allow immigrants to the South. John C. Calhoun was like, no, none of those brown people unless we own them. So this election map is why I tell you I teach the whole class with just maps. Y'all would hate it. No. This election map is a win for the South, but it is a loss for the South because it opens up some eyes to, oh crap. So, back in Kansas, which is still bleeding, back in Kansas, we have the I told you there's the two governments. The pro-slavery governments, they write down this Lecompton Constitution, which is the pro-slavery Kansas Constitution. This is Kansas trying to become a slave state. But when they do that, they have to popular sovereignty. Who's going to decide? The people. So they put that for the election, and it gets shut down by a large amount of numbers. Because the people that set up the government don't have all the public support. Not a lot of them. The free soilers voted down because they greatly outnumber slave supporters, because for all this time, Kansas has been a non-slavery area. So that the slave people lose the election for their slave state, but the president, Buchanan, here he is again, Buchanan prefers that Kansas becomes a slave state. So he's like, no, that's too bad, we're going to make them a slave state anyway. This pisses off Stephen Douglas, because Stephen Douglas believes in popular sovereignty. So this is the president kind of overruling popular sovereignty, and now Douglas is pissed because popular sovereignty went wrong. Douglas, in Congress, convinces Congress to order another vote. To order Kansas to have another vote, and that will be the final vote to decide free or slave. The Lecompton Constitution is voted down again. So now Kansas will become a what? Free state, yeah. The Northern Democrats are like, look, Douglas did the right thing, he's a hero. But in the process, Douglas loses the South. The South is like, you traitor! You promised to open this territory for slavery, and we gave you your stupid railroad, and then you stabbed us in the back, and you ruined the chance to get slavery spread to Kansas. So look at Douglas. He created this whole ass crisis, so we could end up back where? Where we started, with Kansas as a free territory. But he got his railroad passed, but in the process, he ruined his own political career, because now the Southern Democrats hate him.
Did he at least get his railroad?
What's up?
Did he at least get his railroad?
I don't know. He'll be dead by then. Kansas eventually is admitted as a free state in 1861, but by then the Civil War's already begun. So we have all these people die in Kansas. We have all these people invade Kansas, bleed in Kansas. John Brown's cutting people's heads off. People are burning down abolitionist newspapers, all because Stephen Douglas wanted a railroad. Wow. And then we end up with Kansas, where it was in the first place, excluding slavery. Solid move. Called him a little magician? No. It's a midget idiot. So adding to the tension, if you turn your page, is a really important text, which I've mentioned earlier in the class, but I'm going to have you guys take a quick skim at again. Because it's a very important text that I think I want you guys to really have in your head. Hinton R. Helper. He's a Southerner, so do we assume he's pro or anti-slavery? Pro. False. I know. See how hard it is to assume that blanket stereotypes attached to everybody? That all white people are racist like Calhoun?
We read about it.
You did. So he publishes a book titled The Impending Crisis of the South at the exact same time this is happening. He's going to argue that slavery is actually bad for the South. Slaveholding is hurting the South. Slaveholding is keeping the South down and slowing the South's progress. And I'm going to have you read why he says so right here. So I'm going to give you just four minutes. It's a short, quick text. To tell me what are his arguments against slavery and why. Just identify those on the right-hand column. And then I want you to think about what might this do for public opinion in the South. Who might this be targeting in the South that might agree with what Helper has to say? Fair? Take 4, go from there, and then we'll talk about it. Get after it. Luis, you know highlighter? seconds left. In the right-hand column, I should see factors that he is opposed to slavery because. Alright, so take a second, talk to your partner. What is Helper's general argument? Why is he anti-slavery as a Southerner? And then who might this target? Who might also agree with this perspective, North or South? 1 minute, go for it.
I said that before, right?
Chat to chat. Why are you anti-slavery?
I said that he's against the slavery, not for like, not like out of war or anything, but more because he knows that it affects the way that the, I guess you could say social classes are. Say, like the wealthier white top slaves and everything, while the poor white man was affected by slavery, so it's not really to benefit the slaves, but to benefit the, like the Southerners.
Yeah, good point.
You know the reason like in your nails of your toes, those mostly looked at by the Northerners.
This way.
But the South rejected it because it's.
What if slavery was still a thing today?
It is in many parts of the world.
Oh.
Alright.
I mean, like in the U.S.
It's not. I don't like what if history.
Uh,
Talk to me. Lisa, what do you think? What is his general argument against slavery?
That I heard, like small, well not small, but like the, people who, don't own as much slaves, like as compared to the ones who own a lot, because they can't compete with them.
Yeah. It keeps, who does it keep really rich?
Those things.
Yeah, and then what else do slave owners then also then have?
Power and influence.
What kind of power? Political power, economic power, social power. And he's kind of arguing what I argued to you guys in the first place, that the big slave owners have to keep this myth that it's us against them. That it's all of us white people against the slaves, when in reality he's arguing like, no, it's this little tiny group of elite slave owners against the rest of us. They've just convinced us that we're on their team. It's interesting. What else does he argue that slavery hurts? Go ahead.
Despite hurting poor whites, they're being manipulated by slaveholders into false ideologies, prevents progression such as industrialization.
Yeah, he's saying that because we're so reliant on big slave owning, we're the ones who've kept ourselves from industrialization. We're the ones who still have the exact same economy we had 50 years ago, 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Yeah, maybe the crop has changed, but we have the exact same economic system that we did in 1750, 1800, 1820, 1850. Yes, sir?
That's what you think, that the common white man is like very uneducated and unaware of what's happening.
Yep.
So the slaveholders are like telling them what they want to do.
100%. The common white man's just along for the ride. They've been convinced, they've been conned, they've been manipulated by the big slave owner, and they're just like, yeah, you're right. America's, yeah, Southern rights, slavery, absolutely. He's very right. It's a phenomenal perspective. Now, maybe the common Southern white would agree with him if they could read. They can't read. Dude, literacy rates are terrible. Terrible in the South now. Literacy rates in the poor South are atrocious. In 2018 as well. So, it's important that we understand that Helper's argument is coming from inside the South. And it's a legitimate argument, but at this point it's too late to address things. Here we are in 1857. And it does help us understand how and why the South stays the way the South is. Because the people that benefit from slavery are the ones making the decisions. The ones making the decisions are going to keep things the way they are because they're the ones benefiting from slavery. So, when we get to our lecture on Monday, talking about the different advantages of the war, and we realize how few people the South has compared to the North, how few resources, how few railroads, how few anything, it's because of what Helper is saying, that this slave system has kept us from advancing our society to a place where we can actually compete. Yes, sir?
Like that book about me,
Uh-huh.
the episode, like I don't know, like it's related to this.
Mhm.
They were saying like despite the like the North having way more people being like industrialized,
Uh-huh.
the only thing that the South had in favor of like kind of like having a chance of winning the war was the fact that there's like leadership.
Yeah, and even that part's overrated because that can only take you so far when you're losing thousands and thousands and thousands of men. It's a good point. The only real advantage the South has, we'll talk about the actual advantage. Leadership is an overrated advantage because once the South gets Grant in charge, that leadership advantage is negated. The only advantage the South has is they're fighting a defensive war. They're the ones fighting on their home turf. All they have to do is hold out long enough. They have to kick us in the shin long enough until we go away, much like the Americans and the British. All right, so the next big turning point in this crazy sectional decade is a very important Supreme Court case, which I would argue next year when you guys take Gov, I would argue it's the worst Supreme Court case in history. There's this one. The second one is Plessy versus Ferguson, which we're talking about in period 6, maybe the end of period 5. And the third one is Citizens United versus the FEC, which is a brand new court case. So this dude is named Dred Scott. He looks eternally confused, which is good. Yeah, it's a good way to look. If you always look confused, nobody will ask you for directions ever. So Dred Scott, his owner, his master, takes him from Missouri to Wisconsin. Missouri, slave state or free state?
Slave.
Wisconsin.
Free.
How do we know Wisconsin's free?
Because it's like in the north.
No, that's not why.
It's in the north.
Sure. Why? How do we? What made it free?
It's a
That's
territory.
Northwest ordinances. It's the 5th state. So I can keep bringing those bad boys up. It's the 5th state of the Northwest ordinances. So his master takes him here. And the question becomes, if my owner takes me to a free state where slavery is illegal, am I then free?
Wait, he traveled with his owner?
Yeah. His owner took him to Missouri. So, I know, it's a good question. What do you guys think?
Depends on how you know it.
If he's still his
He's
slave.
still slave because he's
It's like if you take your dog, I'm not saying that's.
What if you take, I know what you're saying. Well, what if you take your dog somewhere dogs are illegal? It's no longer your dog.
Exactly.
Oh,
Take
he's
your
still my
dog to
dog.
somewhere where dogs
What if,
are-
here's a good one.
What?
What if you take your weed somewhere weed is illegal?
Why would you take it in the first place?
It's
That's
still
not what I'm asking.
It's still your
Is it still your weed?
Could your weed be taken away from you and
Yeah.
can you lose your property because you took it somewhere where it's illegal?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question, right? What if you took your heroin? I'm just kidding, it's illegal. So,
What if you took your Montes to
yeah, I don't take more of this anywhere. So, I do actually, it's kind of sad. So, and that's his argument is because I was taken somewhere where slavery is illegal, I can no longer be a slave. Because I'm in a free territory. I think the weed comparison is kind of a better one to get your minds around. For those of you who don't know what weed is marijuana. Elliot? Fair? You want to start this conversation?
This even didn't talk about.
So he sues. He files a lawsuit, which is in the Bill of Rights. We have the right to sue in court, and he sues to say I should be free because I was taken to a free territory. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and they have 2 things to decide. One, A, does Congress even have the power to decide if slavery was legal there or not as a territory? And B, is the Missouri Compromise even constitutional? Because he's up above the Missouri Compromise. So they have to decide, the Supreme Court has to decide, A, is this guy free? And B, what else should we decide? So the Supreme Court rules in 1857, in the big turning point before the Civil War. First of all, they ruled something that that wasn't even part of the case. The Supreme Court says, A, we didn't even have to hear this case we didn't have to decide this case. This case doesn't even need to be in this court because it's a black guy suing. And because he's an African American, he has no right to be in this court. Only citizens have the right to hear their case in the Supreme Court, and because he's not a citizen, we don't even have to decide this case. Was that part of the conversation before the case? No. They went a little bit above and beyond here to make this point, which was unnecessary to make. First piece. Second piece, Congress, this is the important piece about the Taney Court. Congress has no power to decide where slavery is and isn't allowed. Let's think about that for a second. Congress has no power. The national government has no power to decide where slavery can or can't go. Now, if Congress can't do it, who could do it? The states. The states. Then it's not a national government decision. The states for themselves have to decide if they are going to be free or a slave in the first place. So far, so good?
Yeah.
So by its very nature, what did it rule unconstitutional? The Northwest Ordinance and the Missouri Compromise. Because both of those things are things in which the National Congress, it's kind of hard to rule the Northwest Ordinances unconstitutional because that wasn't even done under the Constitution, under the Articles. But it rules that Congress has no power to decide where slavery can or can't go. So in a sense, what did it just open up to slavery? Louder. The whole entire nation. Yeah, because Congress can't rule slavery illegal, only the states can do that. So in a sense, Shaylee, phenomenal point, what it does is it makes this open to slavery, 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 this open to slavery. So all these states have by themselves outlawed slavery. So that's cool because they're states, they did it on their own way. But it's everybody else, the rest of the territory, and, which makes the South very happy, any further territory we acquire. What if we go conquer Canada? What if we go fight for more of Mexico? What if we, because Congress can't decide it, the state itself can decide it. Dirty, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
So the whole 3630
Gone. Gone. Well, in theory, the 3630 is already gone because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. But the idea of the 3630 line is now ruled unconstitutional, not allowed, because it's not Congress's decision anyway. So my second question there is, so again, what kind of decision is this? A very, very states' rights decision. And now this is under the Supreme Court of Roger Taney. Because John Marshall finally died.
Oh, yeah.
Northern abolitionists are furious. And then I ask you, for your next question, how do you guys think Marshall would have ruled? And why? So take a minute, talk to your partner. How would Marshall have ruled in this case, and why?
Marshall was a Federalist, right?
Yeah. Marshall was the, yeah.
So he would have done things the Federalist way. If the Federalists went to national Republicans, and
You notice how many
the
times we do
Whigs,
that?
and the Whigs went to Republicans,
Little things.
it would have been like no
What
slavery.
Hamilton?
What did he just say?
Yeah, I think so too, because
Prevented
there was
Nebraska Act.
what's it called?
No. That's
There
a
was
compelling
another,
question.
Oh yeah,
With the natives, right?
Would
Yeah,
Marshall
with the
have
natives, and he
prevented it?
sided
No,
with
because
the
it's an act of Congress.
So I'm pretty sure.
And all it was
as of
doing
now,
was
he would
overriding
side
a
with
previous
the-
act of Congress.
What would
It was
be
Congress
before,
changing
yeah,
their
by the
mind.
Constitution.
It wasn't necessarily their
So,
Constitution.
I can't think of
But he
it.
would never would have said that Congress didn't have the power to do this because he thought Congress had full power because of the Elastic Clause.
Yeah, when did Marshall die?
Yeah. Roger Taney.
Taney and Taunton.
I know, you're right.
When
White people.
When did Marshall die?
What?
When did Marshall die?
Marshall died 1830s. 1830s.
Shoot.
So he's been gone for 20 years. So, talk to me. Slaney.
And we never had a funeral?
Slaney. What would Marshall have ruled and why?
Well, Daniel and I agreed that he probably would have ruled, well, like, given the, how do you put it? Like, agreed with Judge Scott, because we used the other case with the natives and the, was it Georgia?
Yeah, Worcester v. Georgia?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
that
you
he,
using precedent.
that he, like, agreed with what the natives were arguing for, that something was already established, so they can't go against it.
Fantastic. We don't know what he would have ruled on the slave issue, but he definitely wouldn't have ruled that Congress doesn't have the power to regulate something. He gave Congress the power to regulate all the time. What else did he give Congress the power to do by his interpretation? Make a bank. Regulate interstate commerce. Given to the Ogden. McCulloch versus Maryland. So like he always sided with the federal government having the authority, and that was a really good extra pull as well, that he would have agreed with the precedent of having this law already established, much like Worcester versus Georgia. He would have probably sided, or could have sided with Dred Scott. And even if he didn't side with Dred Scott, and even if he said, sorry, Dred Scott, because you're a slave, you're still property, you're still a slave, he wouldn't have gone this far to make it so that Congress didn't have the authority to regulate slavery where it was. That was good. Things like that, when I hear things like that, and I hear Ruby asking, would John Marshall have allowed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, like, makes me sleep well at night. Her question was good, though. Would Marshall have allowed the Kansas-Nebraska Act? Absolutely. Because the Kansas-Nebraska Act was just Congress changing its mind from the Missouri Compromise. It was Congress changing Congress's mind. It wasn't taking any power away from Congress. Good question, though. And phenomenal response there. Nicely done, guys. Small classes are the best. We should just lock everybody out on one day.
Yeah.
Are you here on Thursday? Beat it!
First come, first serve.
You've been scheduled into Mr. Cerna's third period? So, as you can see, this is a time of a lot of tension. This is the last real big win for the South, though. The South thinks the Dred Scott case is like their final nail, that yeah, we're good to go, slavery's safe forever. And in theory, they're kind of right. Supreme Court cases are kind of forever until they change their mind, which takes a lot. So this makes slavery look like it's going to be ensconced or safe as an institution for as long as the U.S. keeps expanding, because Congress will not be able to regulate where it goes or doesn't go. Now, in the midst of all of this, we have a super small, which turns into a super big congressional race. Now, we have Abraham Lincoln, and we have Stephen Douglas, and they're running for the House of Representatives. Now, there's a lot of members in the House of Representatives, hundreds. So does one member of the House matter that much? No. No, I mean, it's important because they represent this district. We have our midterm elections, for example, on Tuesday of next week. So in this district, there's a representative that goes in the House of Representatives. Where I live, there's a representative. Each district has a representative, so it's a big deal. But there's at this time, over 200 members in the House of Representatives. There's a lot of House members. So for that reason, like a single House of Representative member is not that consequential. You with me so far? Yeah. Senators are super important. There's only 2 per state. All right, but Illinois has, 12 different House of Representatives members, or 8. So it's just 1 of 8 or 1 of 10 or 1 of 12 members that are going to represent Illinois. But in this case, we have 2 dudes that are one's kind of famous and one's really famous, and one's about to get way more famous, running for the exact same seat or the same office in Congress. Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. Now, up to this point, who's the guy who's more well-known? Yeah, Douglas is way more well-known. He's been in Congress for a long time. He's represented the Democrats. He's one of the leaders in Congress. And he's running in 1858, now into an Illinois Senate, a state Senate race. So they're running for senator. And they're going to hold a bunch of debates. They're going to argue with each other in public. This is before TV, before radio. So they're going to have these big, publicly attended debates where they're going to argue about the issues in front of thousands of people at times. And their arguments are going to be printed in newspapers, and they're going to be sent all over Illinois. Who do you think is the favorite?
Douglas.
Douglas, absolutely. Absolutely. So Douglas is a Democrat. He's very experienced. He's very well known. And he thinks he's going to be president next. The new guy is Lincoln. He used to be a House of Representative member before. Now he's running for Senate. There's only been 2 of them. He used to be a House member under the Mexican-American War. Remember that in spot resolutions? When he's like, oh, I don't know about this. He was only a 1-term House member. He had 1 term. Then his party didn't renominate him for re-election. They had to rotate seats. So his real political experience is limited. He's running for Senate of Illinois. And he's a Republican, brand new party. Now, we know Douglas's views on slavery. He believes in popular sovereignty. Let it spread out if the people want to spread it out. Let the states choose for themselves. Lincoln's a little different. Lincoln's views on slavery are a little bit vague up until this point, and even they evolved through his presidency. So we can't attach Lincoln's views on slavery to him now because they're going to change over time. The more he learns, the more he experiences through the Civil War, which we'll talk about Monday and Wednesday and Thursday of next week, his views on slavery are going to change, and that's really important for us to understand. But at this time, he argues the two races can't really live together as equals. They're not equal races. But he does think slavery is wrong. He's morally opposed to slavery. Now, it's possible, hear me out, it's possible to believe slavery is wrong on one hand, and also not believe black and white people are equal on the other hand. You can believe that white people are superior to black people, but also not believe that black people should be held as property. Am I making some sense? Yeah. So often we get stuck in this. Either you're anti-slavery or you're racist. Like there's way more levels to this. Like you can be a racist and still believe that slavery is wrong. So that's where Lincoln falls. But he is very anti-expansion of slavery, very vehemently as a Republican, very aggressively anti-expansion of slavery. Does not think slavery should go anywhere, and he believes that if slavery stays where it is, it will die a natural death. Over time, the South, when they can't fight to expand slavery, will realize that slavery is wrong, will begin to phase out, and it will die over time. So they have these huge debates, 7 of them all over the states. In the second debate, a very important one, Lincoln asks Douglas an important question. Lincoln asks Douglas, hey, you believe in popular sovereignty. How can you reconcile the existence of popular sovereignty, of letting the people decide, with what the Supreme Court just said in that slavery could go anywhere? How can those two things coexist? And Douglas's response is called the Free Port Doctrine. The Free Port Doctrine. And the Free Port Doctrine argues that it doesn't really matter what the Supreme Court says. Slavery can only exist, which is actually kind of a good point. Slavery can only exist where public opinion supports it. Slavery can only exist where the local police enforce it, where the local white population enforces it, where the local regular people that are everyday people agree that this is the right thing. As soon as that goes away, slavery will go away. He says it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says. If the Supreme Court says we can take slavery to Oregon or Washington, fine. But if the people of Oregon or Washington don't want it and won't support it, it won't matter. Because if one slave owner shows up with 10 slaves and the other 1,000 people in that town are anti-slavery, what are those people going to do when the slave runs away? They're going to help? The slave, yeah. You guys hear something? I haven't seen any slaves around here. Who's that black guy? I don't know. He's new around here. I don't know. No, I've never seen him before. I don't know. So this Free Port Doctrine makes Douglas's views on slavery very clear. In the end, Douglas wins the Senate seat. Douglas wins the election. But Lincoln adds a lot of credibility for the Republican Party by running for the Senate seat, by having these important debates. And he becomes kind of a dark horse or a sneaky dude to watch for the next presidential election. All right. So it does add a lot of credibility to this new Republican Party. Let's go.
The
All right.
spirits of my fellow classmates.
So on the back side, I have 2 excerpts from, they have 7 debates that I could have you read, but that seems a little aggressive to read all 7 debates. So I have Lincoln's famous speech, which is very important. It's in the debates, his House Divided speech, which is well worth reading. And then I have Douglas's Free Port Doctrine as well. What's up? So these are the 2, in my opinion matters, most of the way. My mom told me. In my opinion, the 2 most important documents to come out of this Lincoln-Douglas debate. So I'm going to have you read them both side by side. I'm going to give you 8. It's a nice little chunk of time to read Lincoln's, to read Douglas's, and to tell me how their views on slavery are different. Okay? Take your 8. Read them both side by side and answer me at the bottom, how are their views on slavery different? Go for it. 2 or so minutes left, unless we don't need it, but it looks like we need it, 'cause that would be a whole bunch of those questions actually answered. Thanks. ¿Debates? Sí. Ahora. How? Why? Is someone to laugh? Okay, that's a great question. All right, have a quick 1-minute chat. How do these two dudes differ on slavery? What are their perspectives on slavery? What does that mean for the country going forward? How about it? Talk so bad.
Lincoln thinks that they cannot be half free.